Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a world without thermostats, without central heating, without radiators or electric blankets, or the simple luxury of turning a dial and making a room warm. Tonight we're going to find out how the people who came before all of that actually survived the cold. And I mean actually survived it. Not the romantic version, not the cozy fireplace version, but the real thing. What it felt like, what it cost, what it took, every single day, just to stay alive when the temperature dropped and the wind came in. Before we get into it, take a moment to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps, and we've got a lot more of this kind of thing coming. The year is somewhere around 10,000 BCE. You are in a cave. Not a cartoon cave. Not a smooth-walled cartoon hollow with a fire conveniently centered and a bearskin rug laid out. A real cave, which means the floor is uneven limestone, cold and hard. The walls are damp in places where groundwater seeps through the rock, and the ceiling, 8 feet above your head in the highest part of the space, comes down to 4 feet at the edges where the walls curve in. The cave is approximately 30 feet deep and 20 feet wide at its broadest point. You share it with 11 other people, the band you have been part of since birth, the people who are your entire social world. 3 of them are old, which in this context means past 40. 4 of them are children. The rest are in their teens and 20s, their bodies lean and hard from a life that never stops requiring physical effort. Outside, it is January in what will one day be called southern France, in the region that will eventually be known as the Dordogne, where the limestone cliffs are honeycombed with caves that will preserve evidence of your kind for 20,000 years. The temperature outside is approximately 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind is coming from the north, down from the ice sheets that cover most of the continent above a line roughly equivalent to modern Belgium. Inside the cave, it is warmer than outside. Not warm. Warmer. This is the first thing your ancestors figured out about surviving cold, and it is also the most fundamental. The earth itself is a thermal mass. The rock that surrounds you, the soil beneath you, absorbs and retains heat with a persistence that air does not. The temperature of the rock in this cave at this depth is approximately 55 degrees Fahrenheit regardless of the season. In the summer, the cave is cool. In the winter, the cave is warmer than the air outside by as much as 35 degrees. You did not build this. The earth built it for you. You merely found it and recognized what it was. But 55 degrees is not warm. 55 degrees, sustained, with inadequate clothing and no fire, will produce hypothermia over the course of hours, slower than 20 degrees, but the destination is the same. The cave is shelter, but shelter alone is not enough. You have fire. The fire is near the mouth of the cave, not at the back, where the instinct might be to retreat deepest into shelter, but near the entrance, where the natural airflow carries the smoke outward rather than filling the interior with the particulate that would otherwise coat the lungs of everyone inside. The placement of the fire in Paleolithic cave sites, deduced from charcoal deposits and ash stains on cave floors, shows consistent evidence of exactly this positioning. Your ancestors understood ventilation without having a word for it. They understood it because the people who didn't understand it filled their caves with smoke and died of respiratory failure, and the people who positioned their fires correctly lived to teach their children. The fire is fueled by wood, gathered during the warmer months and stored in the driest corner of the cave's interior, because wood that is wet does not burn effectively, and the effort of gathering and drying it is a form of saving. You have been thinking about fire since summer. You have been making decisions about which wood to collect, how much, where to store it, based on a calculation of how many cold months lie ahead. This calculation is entirely unconscious. You have no language for fuel reserves or thermal planning, but it is entirely real. Every adult in your band is performing it. The result is a stack of wood in the back of the cave that you have been protecting and rationing since the first hard frost. The fire produces light and warmth and psychological reassurance in proportions that cannot be easily separated, because all 3 are the same thing in this context. The warmth radiates outward from the fire in a sphere of influence that diminishes rapidly with distance. The physics of radiant heat are indifferent to your comfort, and at 10 feet from the fire, the temperature is already significantly lower than at 5 feet. You have learned, without being taught, to arrange yourselves around the fire in a specific way that maximizes the warmth available to the most people. The children are closest. The oldest members of the group are also close. The adults with the most physical resilience and the most body fat, the ones who have eaten best through the fall hunting season, are at the outer edge of the fire's warmth, where the temperature is lower and their reserves will buffer them through the night. This is not a rule. It is behavior, accumulated through centuries of cold nights into a social pattern that has become instinct. Your group takes care of its most vulnerable members, not because someone has reasoned out the ethical argument for it, but because groups that did not take care of their vulnerable members had more dead people over the winter and were less effective at surviving, and eventually those groups stopped existing. The warmth of the fire is supplemented by the warmth of each other. You sleep together, pressed against other bodies, the heat of multiple metabolisms combining in the space between you in a way that no single body can replicate alone. The sleeping arrangement around the fire, adults surrounding children and elderly, bodies overlapping, the physical contact that modern sensibilities would find startling but that your nervous system registers as safety, produces a micro-environment between bodies that is several degrees warmer than the air of the cave itself. The clothing you wear to sleep is not removed. You sleep in what you wear during the day because the thermal mass of the fur and hide that wraps your body during the day is the same thermal mass that keeps you alive during the night. The distinction between waking and sleeping clothing will not exist for most of human history. You wear what you have, always, because the cold does not observe your schedule. The clothing itself is worth understanding in detail because it represents one of the most sophisticated technological achievements of the pre-modern world, accomplished with nothing but stone tools, sinew, and the bodies of animals. The fur and hide clothing that your group wears is not simply a skin thrown over the shoulders. It is tailored, cut and shaped to fit the human body, with seams sewn with thread made from animal sinew, using needles made from bone that are so finely made that examples preserved in archaeological deposits from this period are indistinguishable in function from modern sewing needles. The tailoring is everything. A loose fur draped over the shoulders creates gaps at the wrists, the neck, the waist, gaps through which the body's warmth escapes and through which cold air enters. A fitted garment with sealed seams at every opening retains warmth in the layer of still air between the skin and the fur, and still air trapped against the body is one of the most effective insulators in nature. This is the same principle that underlies modern thermal underwear, modern down jackets, modern sleeping bags. The technology is different, the principle is identical. Your clothing is layered. Not because someone has explained the science of layered insulation to you, but because experience has taught your group that one thick garment is less effective than two lighter garments worn together, because the air trapped between the layers adds its insulation to the insulation of the garments themselves. You wear a close-fitting inner garment of scraped hide against the skin, and over it a larger, looser outer garment of fur worn with the fur side outward. The outer fur sheds wind and moisture. The inner hide traps warmth. Between them, a layer of air. The extremities are the crisis points. Fingers and toes, the nose and ears. These are where frostbite begins, where the body sacrifices peripheral tissue to protect the core. Mittens. Not gloves because individual fingers lose heat far faster than a mitten's combined warmth allows. Cover the hands. Foot wrappings, shaped and tied. Cover the feet inside boots that extend to the knee. The hood of the outer garment pulls close around the face, leaving only the essential openings, because the face radiates heat at a rate disproportionate to its surface area. You are, when fully dressed, wearing approximately 10 to 15 pounds of clothing. Every movement requires more energy than the same movement in lighter clothing. But the alternative to the weight is exposure. And exposure in this climate in January is death. So the weight is the price of continued existence, and you pay it without registering it as a price. Now move forward in time. Leave the cave. Leave the Paleolithic entirely. The year is approximately 500 CE. You are in a longhouse in Norway. The longhouse is different from the cave in almost every respect except the one that matters most. It is a space created by human beings, designed to trap warmth in a cold environment, and it works by the same principles that the cave works by, adapted for a structure that can be built anywhere rather than found only where geology provides. The longhouse is approximately 80 feet long and 20 feet wide, built of timber posts and planked walls with a thatched roof. The structure houses your family, not your nuclear family in the modern sense, but your extended family, which includes your parents, your siblings, and their spouses and children, and possibly elderly relatives who are no longer capable of independent living. 15 people, perhaps 20. The structure also, at one end separated from the human living space by a low partition, houses the livestock. 2 cows, 4 sheep, a handful of goats. The livestock are not in the longhouse because the Norse had peculiar attachment to their animals. They are in the longhouse because each cow produces, through the metabolic processes of digestion and respiration, the equivalent of a small space heater, approximately 1,500 BTUs per hour. 4 cows and several sheep in an enclosed space produce enough metabolic heat to raise the interior temperature of the structure measurably. The smell is significant. The smell is also survival. In a climate where the winter temperature outside the longhouse walls regularly drops to single digits Fahrenheit, and you accept it as you accept the weight of the clothing, because the alternative is worse. The central fire of the longhouse burns in a long trench cut into the packed earth floor, running nearly the full length of the living space. The smoke rises to the roof and exits through gaps in the thatch. No chimney, no flue. Just the natural convection that carries smoke upward and through the loosely structured roof covering. The roof, which sounds like a poor ventilation solution, is actually a reasonably effective one. The smoke rises, the rising smoke creates a draw that pulls fresh air in at the lower walls, and the circulation prevents the interior from becoming lethally choked with particulate. It also means that the upper air of the longhouse, the air between head height and the roof peak, is perpetually hazy with smoke. You learn to live below the smoke. You eat and work and sleep at a level where the air is breathable, and you do not stand fully upright any more than necessary, not because of the height of the ceiling, but because of the quality of the air above your head. The walls of the longhouse are chinked, the gaps between the planks filled with moss and mud, renewed annually as the materials dry and crack, because a wall with gaps is a wall that fails at its primary thermal function. The maintenance of the building's thermal integrity is constant seasonal work, part of the autumn preparation for winter that occupies weeks of labor. The roof is re-thatched where it has thinned. The floor around the fire pit is banked with additional insulating material. Every gap and opening that can be sealed is sealed. The beds, elevated platforms along the inner walls, raised above the floor to take advantage of the warmer air that collects above ground level, are covered with animal hides and wool blankets. You sleep on hides and under hides, the same principle as the cave dwellers 9,500 years before you. Trap the body's warmth, prevent it from dissipating into the surrounding air. The elevated position of the sleeping platforms is not merely comfort. Cold air is denser than warm air and collects at floor level. A sleeping person on the floor of a Nordic longhouse loses heat to the cold ground at a rate that a sleeping person on an elevated platform does not. Your ancestors built the platforms for reasons they understood empirically without articulating theoretically. The winter night in Norway in 500 CE is approximately 18 hours long. This is not a detail. This is 18 hours in which the fire must be maintained, in which the darkness outside is total and the cold is at its most extreme, in which the resources of warmth and fuel and food that the household has been accumulating since summer are being drawn down at their maximum rate. The fire does not go out overnight. Someone, and this responsibility rotates through the household's adults, no one person bearing it every night, maintains the fire through the darkness, adding wood when necessary, managing the burn to conserve fuel while maintaining sufficient heat. The careful management of the fire's fuel consumption is a nightly calculation that has real consequences. Too much wood tonight means less wood next week, and the wood supply has to last until the thaw, which in a bad year might not come until April. You know approximately how much wood you have. You know approximately how many nights remain before the seasonal warmth returns. You keep the math in your head, not as numbers, but as a felt sense of adequacy or inadequacy. The same way you keep the state of the food supply and the health of the livestock and every other variable that determines whether your household survives the season intact. Move forward again, cross the ocean. The year is approximately 1100 CE. You are in a semi-subterranean house on the Alaskan coast. The people around you will one day be called the Yupik, though they have their own word for themselves, and it is not that word. The house you are in is unlike anything you have encountered in Europe. It is built into the earth. The walls are the earth itself, cut down 4 feet below the surface and lined with driftwood and whalebone. The roof is supported by whale jawbones, the largest structural elements available in a treeless coastal landscape, and is covered with sod, living turf, still rooted, still alive, a 2-foot thick layer of organic material that insulates with an efficiency that timber cannot match. The sod roof is green in summer. In winter it is buried under snow, and the snow adds its own insulation to the insulation of the living turf beneath it. The entry to the house is not through the wall, it is through the floor. A tunnel, approximately 4 feet high and 15 feet long, that descends from ground level and enters the house through a trap door in the floor. The cold trap. Cold air is dense and heavy. It sinks. A tunnel that enters a house from below means that cold air entering the tunnel sinks and pools in the lower section of the tunnel rather than flowing into the house. The warm air of the interior stays in the interior, separated from the cold outside air by a simple architectural feature that requires no moving parts and no technology beyond the understanding that cold air sinks. This is not primitive engineering. This is elegant engineering, a solution to a thermal problem that uses the natural physical properties of air to achieve without complexity what a modern building achieves with insulated doors and weather stripping and draft excluders. The cold trap tunnel of the Yupik semi-subterranean house is one of the most effective passive thermal management systems ever developed by any culture. The heat inside the house comes from 2 sources. The stone lamp, a shallow bowl carved from soapstone filled with rendered seal or whale oil with a wick of dried moss, burns continuously. The kulik, as it is called, is not a dramatic source of heat. It produces a flame approximately the size of a candle flame, multiplied across several lamps burning simultaneously in the household. What it produces, in a well-insulated semi-subterranean space occupied by several bodies, is sufficient. The body heat of the people in the house, combined with the lamp heat, combined with the extraordinary insulating efficiency of the sod and earth construction, maintains the interior temperature at a level that is comfortable enough for the inhabitants to spend significant time in minimal clothing, and this is perhaps the most remarkable feature of the Arctic cold adaptation. The ability to manage the thermal environment so precisely through architecture and fuel management that the interior of the house becomes a genuinely warm space even when the exterior temperature is 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The kolik is managed by the women of the household. This is not a casual assignment. The kolik is the thermal and light source for the house, and its management, the trimming of the wick, the maintenance of the oil supply, the adjustment of the flame to balance warmth against fuel consumption, is skilled and important work. A poorly managed kolik is a cold house and a dark house, and a cold house in the Arctic in January is a house where people die. The women who tend the kolik are performing every day a task of genuine survival importance that is not captured in any romantic or decorative framing of their role. The clothing worn in the Arctic is the most sophisticated cold weather garment system ever developed by any culture on Earth, and this is not hyperbole. The parka, the hooded overgarment that is the Yupik and Inuit cold weather system's primary element, is made from specific animal skins selected for their thermal properties. Caribou hide is preferred for interior garments because the individual hairs of caribou fur are hollow, a structure that traps air inside each hair shaft, adding the insulation of trapped air to the insulation of the fur itself. The outer surface of the outer parka is often made from gut skin, the intestine of seals or bears, scraped thin and prepared until it is nearly transparent, then sewn into a waterproof outer shell that sheds wind and moisture while adding minimal weight. The seams of Arctic clothing are sewn with a technique specifically designed to prevent moisture penetration. The stitches are made in a pattern that closes when the thread is wet and tightens when it dries, creating a seam that is not merely decorative but actively waterproof. The women who produced this clothing spent years learning the technique. A poorly sewn seam in an Arctic garment is a gap through which wind enters, through which moisture enters, through which warmth exits, and in conditions of sustained extreme cold, a poorly sewn seam can be the difference between returning from the hunting ground and not returning. Move again. Go south and east. Go forward another few centuries. The year is 1300 CE. You are in a castle in northern England. The castle is made of stone, and the stone is the problem. Everything about castle construction that makes it militarily effective, the mass of the walls, the height, the solidity of the towers, makes it thermally terrible. Stone has high thermal mass, meaning it absorbs and retains temperature changes slowly. In summer, the stone walls of a castle stay cool, which is pleasant. In winter, the stone walls of a castle absorb the cold of weeks of winter air and become themselves a cold surface radiating coldness into the interior space. The castle in winter is not simply cold because the outside is cold. The castle is cold because the walls themselves are cold, and the walls are many feet thick and will not warm quickly regardless of how many fires are lit. The Great Hall, the primary communal space of the medieval castle, has a fireplace. One fireplace, in a hall that might be 60 feet long and 30 feet wide, with stone walls and a stone floor and a ceiling that rises 30 feet above you. The fireplace produces heat that rises immediately to the ceiling, radiates outward in a sphere that reaches perhaps 15 feet from the hearth with any effectiveness, and otherwise achieves little in a space of this volume. You sit close to the fire. Everyone sits close to the fire. The hierarchy of the castle is expressed, in the winter, in proximity to the fire. The lord and his immediate family occupy the seats nearest the hearth. The guests of honour are next. The household retainers fill the middle distance, and the servants and lowest members of the household occupy the cold periphery of the hall, where the breath of the people mists and the drink in the cup is warmer than the air around it. The hangings on the walls, the tapestries that medieval castles are famous for, are not decoration. Or rather, they are decoration, but they are also insulation. A tapestry hung against a stone wall creates an air gap between the fabric and the stone. That air gap, like all trapped air gaps, insulates. The tapestry prevents the cold stone from radiating its coldness directly into the interior air. It also catches and blocks the drafts that find their way through the mortar joints of the stone walls, and there are always drafts. A medieval castle is not sealed. It is a stack of stones with gaps between them, and the wind that blows across the Yorkshire moors in January finds every gap. The floors are covered with rushes, dried marsh grass, laid in a deep layer across the cold stone, renewed periodically as the lower layers decay. Walking on rushes, sitting on rushes, sleeping on rushes, the organic material provides a thin layer of insulation between your body and the stone floor, and thin is better than nothing when nothing is the alternative. The rushes also harbour insects, which is unpleasant, and the decay of the lower layers produces an earthy smell that is preferable to what preceded it in an era before modern sanitation, which is what you'll just have to accept. Your clothing is heavier than you would choose to wear if the temperature permitted choice. Wool is the primary material, not because medieval people preferred it aesthetically, but because wool is the most effective natural fibre for cold weather management. Wool traps air in its fibre structure, providing insulation even when wet, unlike linen, which loses most of its insulating value when damp, or cotton, which is not widely available in northern England in 1300 CE. You wear multiple layers of wool, and you wear them to bed, and you sleep under wool blankets and under a fur coverlet if you are of sufficient status to own one, and you pull the bed curtains closed around you. The bed curtains that the modern eye reads as decorative canopy are, functionally, a tent within the room, enclosing a small volume of air that your body warms and that the curtains prevent from circulating into the larger cold room. The bed curtain is one of the most underappreciated thermal technologies of the medieval world. A four-poster bed with full curtains drawn creates a sleeping environment that is genuinely warmer than the room surrounding it, warm enough that the difference is the difference between adequate sleep and miserable, shivering wakefulness. The people who slept in curtained beds slept better and were better rested and were therefore more effective at everything they needed to be effective at. And the people who could not afford curtained beds were less rested and less effective. And this was just one of the many ways in which medieval material poverty compounded itself into reduced capacity. The servants sleeping in the great hall closest to the fire but without curtained beds, wrapped in whatever blankets they own, lying on the rushes. They are warmer than they would be anywhere else in the castle, and they are colder than everyone else in the castle who has a room and a bed and curtains. This is the thermal geography of medieval life. Warmth follows status, and the gap between the warmest and the coldest person in the same building is measured in degrees that matter. There is one more stop on this journey that we cannot skip, because it represents perhaps the most sophisticated system of communal warmth management that any pre-modern civilization ever developed. You are in Korea. You are in a house with a floor made of stone, and that stone floor is warm. It is warm because beneath it runs a system of channels, flues, connected to a fire burning in a furnace at one end of the house, carrying the hot gases from that fire under the floor and out through a chimney at the opposite end. The heat from the exhaust gases passes through the stone floor above the channels, and the stone, that same high thermal mass material that makes the English castle so cold, absorbs the heat and radiates it upward into the room, warming the air from below. This is the Ondol system, and it has been in use in Korea for over 2,000 years. Air heating is inefficient because warm air rises immediately to the ceiling where no one is living, and the warm air at ceiling level exchanges heat with the cold air at floor level through convection in a continuous cycle that maintains the living zone, knee height and below, where people actually sit and sleep, at a temperature lower than the ceiling. Radiant floor heating bypasses this problem entirely. The floor is warm. Everything above the floor is warmed by contact with the floor, by the radiant heat rising from it, by the convection it sets up that begins at floor level rather than at ceiling level. The living zone is warm. The ceiling is relatively not the problem. Korean houses designed around the Ondol are arranged for life at floor level. You sit on the floor. You sleep on the floor, on thin mats, because the thick insulating bedding that is necessary in a room heated from above is counterproductive in a room heated from below. The furniture is low. The social life of the household happens on the warm floor, which is, in winter, the warmest and most comfortable surface in the house. And in a cold climate, this means it is where people want to be. The Ondol requires careful fuel management. The fire in the furnace that heats the floor must be sustained throughout the cold months, and the wood or charcoal required to do this is a significant household expense. The channels under the floor must be kept clear. Ash and debris accumulate in the flues and reduce their efficiency, requiring periodic cleaning that is difficult and unpleasant. The mortar between the floor stones must be maintained because cracks allow the hot exhaust gases to enter the living space, and those gases contain carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide in an enclosed space kills people. The Ondol system is effective, but it requires management, skill, and the understanding that certain maintenance failures are dangerous. The Ondol survived, in essentially its original form, into the 20th century in Korea. A 2,000-year-old technology so effective that it remained the primary heating system of rural Korean homes until the introduction of modern heating infrastructure. Its principle has been rediscovered and implemented in modern underfloor heating systems across the world. The technology was never lost because it was never inferior. It was simply waiting to be recognized. Come back now. Come back to the present. You are in a warm room. The temperature of that room is maintained by a system that you almost certainly did not design, do not maintain, and barely think about. Somewhere in or near your building, a furnace or a heat pump or a boiler is operating continuously, controlled by a thermostat that detects deviations of less than a degree from your chosen temperature and corrects them automatically. The system's fuel, gas, electricity, oil, arrives through infrastructure that extends for hundreds of miles and that involves the labor of thousands of people you will never meet. You are, in thermal terms, the most protected human being who has ever existed. The temperature of the air around your body, in your home, in your workplace, in the vehicles you travel in, is controlled to a degree of precision and reliability that no previous generation of human beings has ever experienced. and it is invisible. It is so reliable and so ambient that it has become invisible, the way gravity is invisible, noticed only in its absence, only when the boiler fails and the radiators go cold, and you find yourself, for the first time, experiencing something like what your ancestors experienced every winter of their lives. That is what we've been doing tonight. Not celebrating the past. The past was cold and hard, and the cold killed people, and the systems we've built to prevent that killing are genuine achievements worthy of genuine gratitude. But understanding it. Understanding that the warmth around you right now is the product of an unbroken chain of human ingenuity that stretches back to the first person who carried a burning branch into a cave and realized that this specific location, out of the wind, with the rock wall at the back and the fire at the front, was survivable. That person made a decision that you are still benefiting from. The cave dweller who positioned the fire near the entrance. The Norse household that built the sleeping platforms above the cold floor, the Yupik woman who trimmed the kulik through the Arctic night, the Korean architect who routed exhaust gases under a stone floor, the medieval lord who hung tapestries against the stone wall, not because they were beautiful, though they were, but because without them, the cold would radiate from the walls into the room, and the room would be nearly uninhabitable in January. These were not primitive people improvising desperately. These were engineers, working with the materials and knowledge available to them, solving a problem that was the most urgent and most recurring problem of their lives, with ingenuity and attention and skill. The problem was, it is cold, and we are warm-blooded, and we need to stay that way. The solution was everything we've talked about tonight, and thousands of variations and adaptations and local innovations that we haven't touched. The Roman hypocaust, a floor heating system not unlike the Ondol that Romans developed independently 1,000 years earlier. The Mongolian jeer, a portable structure of such thermal efficiency that it remains the most practical dwelling for the Central Asian steppe in both winter and summer. The Finnish sauna, which is not merely a luxury, but a weekly survival ritual for a people who understood that the controlled application of extreme heat was a way of resetting the body's thermal state for the cold days ahead. Every culture that survived a cold climate developed its answer to the cold. Every answer reflects the specific materials, the specific landscape, the specific social organization of the culture that developed it. None of the answers are simple. All of them are profound, and all of them together are the reason that you are sitting in a warm room right now, taking for granted something that required 40,000 years of human ingenuity to build. The chain that connects you to the person in the cave is unbroken. Every link in it was forged against the cold. The oldest known evidence of controlled fire use by human ancestors dates to approximately 1 million years ago at a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. We have been keeping the cold at bay for a very long time. We have not always succeeded. We got better. If you watched this far, let me know where you're watching from. Consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. See you next time.